All right, so this, of course, is the big story that we are tracking here on WION Pulse, and it's got to do with the British economy that is struggling as it looks ahead for the difficult winter ahead. Now, ushering in an autumn of austerity, the new British government is, of course, taking the very first steps to try and pull the economy back from the brink. Now, announcing the autumn statement, the new Finance Minister, Jeremy Hunt, interestingly, has unveiled a new budget of sorts that's been described as an austerity budget. He's announced $65 billion in terms of tax hikes and massive spending cuts. Now, Jeremy Hunt has also officially declared that the British economy is in a recession. But Jeremy Hunt told the Parliament that the economy will shrink next year and has stressed that there is no way to avoid the painful fiscal medicine to ensure that Britain could in fact build on the recent restoration of calm in the financial markets. Listen in.
Asking more from those who have more means that the first difficult decision I take on tax is to reduce the threshold at which the 45p rate becomes payable from £150,000 to £125,140. Those earning £150,000 or more will pay just over £1,200 more in tax every year.
Now, according to a new report, the failed experiment of the short-lived Trustnomics may have in fact cost the British economy a staggering $35 billion. Liz Truss's suicidal mini-budget eventually paved the way for her downfall. And once bitten, twice shy, the new British government under Rishi Sunak is trying to play safe and not repeat the mistakes while striving to restore the confidence in investors.
Our priorities are stability, growth and public services. We also protect the vulnerable, because to be British is to be compassionate, and this is a compassionate Conservative government.
Now, what is interesting is that the austerity measures could, of course, give some credence to the government's claims of shoring up the British economy. But the British people are looking for some immediate relief from the crippling cost of living crisis that they are now into. Millions of households will, of course, see their energy bills go up by hundreds of pounds per year from April. And also what is interesting is that inflation has hit a 41-year high. Britons are struggling with the burden of higher prices that are simply not matched by their incomes. And the current tax burden will be the highest in at least about 70 years in Britain. Now, there are some global headwinds from the aftershock of the pandemic to the war in Ukraine, but most of Britain's economic wounds, it appears, are self-inflicted. This week, London also lost the crown of the biggest European stock market to Paris. Now, Paris just overtook London to become Europe's biggest stock market, and there is more gloom ahead. The Bank of England has warned that the United Kingdom's economy may in fact experience a record-long recession that could drag on until mid-2024. All right, now to give us more insights in terms of how this austerity budget is actually likely to change the British economy for the good, or how things are likely to impact the British people, we're being joined by economist Lord Desai, and he's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Lord Desai, thank you very much indeed for taking time out and speaking to us here on WION.
Thank you.
Lord Desai, the question that I want to ask you is this. We all heard what Jeremy Hunt had to announce for the British people. He's announced a lot of taxes. Millions of British people will now have to pay more taxes. But looking at the immediate need for the British people who are bracing for a difficult winter ahead, do you think Jeremy Hunt has announced the right things?
I don't think you're quite right about what he has done for the needy people. There is an energy sort of compensation being paid. And what's more interesting is that the benefit payments which the pensioners get and unemployed get have not been cut. He has basically operated them with the inflation. You see, what this particular budget is about is that this is not just a British problem. There's a global stagflation occurring, which started with the energy price shock. And just as in the 1970s, we had an oil price shock, which lasted for many, many years, we are in the beginning of this very deep shock. So I think no other country needs to be complacent about this. This is going to hit everybody. Now, it has hit Britain slightly earlier because of the rather foolish experiment in mini budget by Liz Truss, who was briefly Prime Minister, and that shook the market. So the first task Jeremy Hunt had was to reassure the markets, bring the interest rate on government debt down, and more or less say things will be all right. So what he has done is he has basically taken advantage of the inflation drag. There is a high rate of inflation, 11% as of now, which means that the money incomes will rise, real incomes will rise, but people paying tax will pay more tax because he hasn't adjusted the thresholds at all, and he has put a slightly higher, slightly lower threshold for the higher rate of taxation at 45%. So in a sense, he is getting a little bit from the better off. And another thing he has done is that capital gains are not taxed very much in this country. So he has lowered the thresholds of capital gains tax so that people with capital gains can start paying tax earlier. So I think the idea is that for the time being, if they can contain the worst effect, there is going to be a recession, there is going to be hardship, election will come before 2024, and if they win the election, then they will do all the nasty things they have to do. So this is what I would call whistling in the dark budget. This is hoping that things don't get worse, but they get away with this.
All right, very interesting, the description that you've given this budget, whistling in the dark. You're right when you say that he's in fact looked after the markets, because the markets have not gone into a bit of a meltdown.
Exactly.
The FTSE 100 has just dropped by about 5 points or maybe even less. So the markets have not reacted badly to Jeremy Hunt's budget. But the question, Lord Desai, that I want you to ponder upon is what a lot of people within Britain have been talking about, that the common people in Britain will have to make the hard choice between either eating or heating, because the energy prices, we're given to understand, are going to be substantially higher this winter. So the question that I want to ask you is, it's not just the well-off people that he needs to address in Britain, but rather those who are, somewhere lower down in the pecking order. Has he been able to address their concerns in the immediate, in the immediate time span of the next few weeks, where they can actually pay slightly less energy prices?
What he has done is that we have a number of benefits for pensioners and universal credit for those who are unemployed and poor and so on. He has upgraded those slightly in line with inflation, not fully upgraded, so a little bit more money is going to be there. There has been an energy price concession was announced where government will help households to a certain extent, not entirely. So in a sense, he hasn't been generous, but he hasn't been cruel to the poor. Everybody was worried, would they upgrade in line with inflation or not? What's called the triple lock. These pensions have to be upgraded by the inflation growth or earnings growth, or at least 2.5%. Now he has kept to that promise. And he has sort of only taxed the better off people. So it looks like he's not clobbering the poor. And he has put a tax on the energy companies.
Absolutely.
So in a sense, as I said, he's basically hoping that it doesn't get worse while he is in charge and the thing will get better. My own belief is that he is fooling himself. It's going to get much worse.
All right, you're making a pretty dire projection there. Lord Desai, I just want to interject you there, because you're making this dire projection. You're saying that things are going to get much worse. But Jeremy Hunt is fairly candid when he admitted that Britain is now formally in a recession and things will actually get worse before they get better. But he also had a pretty dire prediction to make, where he said that the recession could in fact go on till 2024. That's a pretty long time, isn't it?
Well, I'm actually predicting a much longer recession for about 10 years.
Right.
Because we had this experience in the 1970s. And at that time, again, the conservatives are not in power. Labour was in power. It's only in the later 70s that they came to power. Mrs. Thatcher came to power, and then she clobbered the economy with very severe taxation and so on. I think people, even the Office for Budget Forecasting, is kind of a budget responsibility. It's sort of saying, oh, the recession won't be very, very severe and it'll only be 2 years. I think we have no business for any such optimism. We are, the global economy is in a stagflation. It is not just the British economy. And while the war, the Russia-Ukraine war is going on, and hopefully we hope China will not start another war. But I think the energy situation is going to be dire for a long time.
All right, that's a pretty dire prediction to make. Thank you very much indeed, Lord Desai, for joining us and getting us all those insights. Now, Jeremy Hunt, one would expect, would of course go to bed tonight, giving himself a pat on the back, saying that at least he did not cause a meltdown in the British markets. Thank you very much. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.